Very good morning, everyone. Welcome to those of you who are here live on the Zoom. We were just talking about that, as live as one can be on a Zoom. And to those of you joining us afterwards on YouTube, then good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. This is the second of 4 teachings on dying as best one can. And so I just carry straight on. And as usual, we'll start by taking a very, very special moment to stop and awaken, rediscover the very best love, loving kindness we can for all other living beings, sentient beings, and feel very, very grateful that we're alive with a precious human existence, that we have Dharma in this human existence, and that we can learn these precious teachings about dying. So we'll do some prayers to that effect. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on, until we reach the very heart of enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and all 6 transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well, live long, be healthy, be well provided for, have good friends, find respect, live in places of peace and plenty. Most of all, may they practice Dharma. May each being create the causes for these good things to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being that's totally beyond suffering. May they attain great equanimity, free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyata shame shamawati shameta shatru Om kuri mara jite karota keyore Te jowati oloyane bishudane male malapanaye Kukure kaka grase grasana Omuki paramuki amuki shammedawani Sawa graha bandhanane nigri hitva sawa bhava pravadina vimukta marabhasha Savitva buddha mudra anukatita sava mare putsarita parishude Viga shantu sava maragama. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our heads on lotus and moon seat, through your immense kindness, ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. So we will pick up from last week, and we do that to refresh our memory of where we were, but also I quite like to go back and then explore a little bit more, add another layer, take things a little bit deeper. So I think where we need to start today is to set ourselves off on a journey of reflection about what happens at death. So I introduced the first session, talking something about that. It will be excellent if you have the time to go on YouTube to a set of teachings I offered about the various bardos, the 6 bardos. That's very, very helpful. We will come to it in a fortnight's time. It's part of these teachings, but a brief version of it is part of these teachings, and a more detailed version is very helpful. But even if you go through those, and even if you read and study a lot, there is not enough information for you to get it. And some of my very best teachers say, Shunyata is easy. Voidness, emptiness. People say it's a very deep topic. It's not that hard. But understanding relative consciousness, karma, and all the rest. See, it's not just a question of information, where you can get the information, and if you've got enough information, you put it together, you've got a structure, and you can say, yeah, it's this and this. Got it. If you think you've got it, you're wrong. Or you are a very advanced being and we ought to swap places, and you should be giving this talk, not me. Because it's like quantum physics or something. Your own meditation practice, your own awareness needs to be very liberated before what's going on with our consciousness is really understood. You need the experience, not knowledge. You don't need facts. You need to go deep into the nature of your mind, the nature of everyone's mind, and how it works. And then it slowly takes shape. Now we have 3 possibilities. Either when we die, it's the end, finished, nothing more afterwards, you've got no continuing consciousness. If that's the case, what you doing here? Get out and enjoy the time you've got and make the most of it in whichever way you like. Get a bucket list and enjoy the buckets. But that's one possibility. I think if you're here, you probably don't believe that. Last week, we looked also at the second possibility. You do believe that consciousness continues after death. Maybe you have the Buddhist view about other lives, reincarnation. Maybe you have a Christian view of that when this life, which is our kind of testing ground, is finished, then depending on what happened in this life, what we did, then we have a forever up there, down there, somewhere in between. But consciousness continues very differently, not like this life. No birth, aging, sickness. That's it, forever. Or if you're in limbo, it's a bit trickier. They don't have a very thorough explanation for what's it called, purgatory. Anyway, but maybe you believe in an ongoing consciousness. And then the third possibility is that you are Buddhist and that you are convinced in yourself that there is rebirth, which is what the main point of the Buddha's teaching is about. Of course, it's not a nihilism. When Buddha says you don't exist, it doesn't mean there's nothing there. It means you don't exist permanently. You don't exist unchangingly. You don't exist independently. But all the Buddha's teachings are that you do exist changingly, so impermanently and interdependently through the power of karma. And everything you experience is like that. It's what all of his teachings are about. Obviously, If we didn't exist, he wouldn't have taught. Who would he have taught? He'd have been a madman, teaching people who don't exist. That's what mad people do. They talk to people who don't exist. Buddha, having reached total enlightenment, if non-self meant there was nobody, nothing at all, nobody there, he wouldn't sit down teaching all those nobodies who weren't there in different ways according to their abilities. He wouldn't have told his main disciples, Shariputra, Mahayana, Mahakashyapa, about their past lives when they were related to him in this and this story and so on. So, of course, we do exist relatively, changingly, interdependently, and the whole of it is like a dream, it's like a mirage. Of course, it's devoid of lasting essence, but it has its changing nature. So if we believe that, then now's the time to think about it in depth, well, using every bit of your intelligence. So think about it. Somebody dies. They've got a whole lifetime of experience. They have language. They can express themselves, sometimes very elegantly, in ideas. In their lifetime, they've sorted out so much. They have explanations. They have structures through which they interpret themselves, life. So, it's a whole mature human being coming to the end of their story. And then physical life ends. So if somebody is reborn human, then given the time to go through the bardo experiences, the time to be conceived, to be born, about a year later, in some maternity unit, you pop out somewhere. That intelligent, organized human being with language and so on has become what? We've all seen babies. What happened? Where did the language go? Where did the knowledge go? Where did so much go? And why is it that we have to start all over again? Get imprinted by new parents, in whichever country you're born in, by the whole way that people grow up in France, in England, in America, wherever it is. We need to really think about that. When you go, how were you? When you're reborn, milk. That's all it's about. Milk and sleep and all that control you had in your past life over your emotions as a Buddhist. You don't. If you're fed up, you screech and you shout. If you're happy, you go blah, 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 blah. It all went. And it takes a long time to get it back. And you're in this body with biology and hormones, and like your frontal cortex doesn't develop until you're 20. So when you're 16 years old, you go sniffing drugs and doing all sorts of wild things because your reason hasn't developed yet, and so on. It all. Think about it again and again and again. It's scary, and this is why Lord Buddha taught. Because people don't know about it, or if they know something about it, they don't really want to think about it. Because we rather let's go out and get a pizza. It's a different thing. Don't want to think about this longer picture, the future. But we need to really think about that. And there we don't have enough information. We've got guidelines. We know about, as we were talking before this talk started, we know about our basic consciousness, alaya vijnana. We know how we imprint it by making karma. So the question is, and this is so vital for our preparation for death, because if we have the motivation, we'll do an excellent preparation as best as we can. This course says as best as you can. It won't be perfect, but it will be the best. if you don't think about what's going on, you won't have the motivation, and you'll make a half-hearted job of it, maybe. So we need to think, what is going to happen to me? There's the immediate dying experiences after death, bardo, yeah, sure. And we can read a bit about those. But in the longer term, there is rebirth. So the question is, what survives death and what doesn't survive death? And what can we do between now and death that is going to input into our stream of consciousness useful, supportive, dynamic factors that will help us as we are dying and will help us beyond death through the bardo experiences and on into the next life. So that's the first thing I needed to say today. Please think about this. And then to say, one thing is, and we learn this mainly in Vajrayana teachings, is that while we're alive, body and mind are inseparable. They're not complementary. They're not two things where you have a mind, you have a body, and they interact and influence each other. Of course, in everyday language, we can express this. It's useful for, we've got to speak, we have to communicate. We can say how the mind influences the body, our body health, how diet and so on influences our mind state, of course, in that kind of language. But actually, when you explore, and according to the tantras, then you cannot separate mind and body while we're alive. That's why, if your brain, which is gunge, basically, very complicated gunge in your head, when you see it in the butcher's shop, it's a bit of jelly. But if that gets damaged, your mind gets damaged. Sometimes you can't, depending which part of that gunge gets hurt, then you can't speak, or you can't remember, or whatever it is. Totally inseparable. But when your consciousness leaves the body, that's all over. Whatever physical limitations were there, they're left behind. The mind is reconstituted. But while we're alive, I think these days we have a fairly good analogy for, now, not just the brain. These days we know you've got the brain, you've got the heart, you've got the gut. All of it is very functional part of our, you say, nervous system intelligence and so on. It's beautiful, it's complicated, but all of our body, and this is expressed in the Vajrayana teachings as our chakras and channels, and how they all feed into an interdependent system. But all of that, and we can just say the brain to keep it simple if you like, is like a hard drive on a computer. Or like my computer hasn't got that big a memory. I've got an external drive, which has a big memory, and where I've got most of my information. So, if our basic consciousness that survives death and moves on is like the computer, then there is this hard drive component which is left behind. It's like if I go to Scotland and I take my computer but not the hard drive, I've only got what's left on the computer. So what survives death and what doesn't? We need to explore that for ourselves through the Buddha's teachings, through the teachings on Bardo, for instance, and through the analogy with dream, because we experience dream life and we know what it's like. But of course, a lot doesn't go with us. This is why newborn babies are not born talking, in the maternity unit. Hi guys, gosh, that was long. 9.5 months in there. Being in that fluid was nice until about 4 or 5 months. Then it got a bit stuffy in there, and then started seeing, nice to see you all. Hi, you my new mum, and all that knowledge you had from before about reincarnation, and you were wondering who's going to be my mum next time round, and all of a sudden you pop out and you can see, sort of with your baby eyes that can't quite see properly, this new mum, and breasts which look more interesting than the face, and so on. That's what you've become. All of us. So much was left behind in the brain and the gut and the heart of that body that you're not in anymore. And then after the hectic bardo experiences, it's like a non-stop LSD trip for 49 episodes, without rest, without a come down and a reassessment. You just swept one experience to the other. Then you're going to be in this new place. And when you hear children speaking, they sound just like their mum or their dad, whoever spoke to them the most. And they're little parrots, monkeys, kind of repeating. They're learning, they're imprinted. And then it's only when you're about 20 or something that you'll get the freedom to start to get some objectivity on all of that upbringing and childhood. So we need to think about that, to understand that what we are going to do now to prepare ourselves for death has great meaning for our future, because what we are doing is going to be dealing as effectively as possible with the imprints in our alaya vijnana, in our subconscious, whatever you want to call it, that will survive death. So what we looked at last week and this week mainly is letting go. Letting go of this life that we're leaving. Because the clinging will not help. The clinging will hinder. It will hinder us, especially in the days after physical death. But in general, the fact that we've got a clingy mind, it's like when you've been doing something with your hands and your hands are sticky. This morning I had honey with my breakfast. The honey jar was sticky. So then afterwards, whatever you touch is sticky because your hands are sticky. It's not that things are sticky. Everything feels sticky, but things aren't sticky. Your hands are sticky. So sticky mind is going to get us into trouble in the future. And the more we stick, the more the trouble. Clinging and attachment is suffering. It's suffering in the long term. Of course, we wouldn't cling and we wouldn't be attached if it wasn't nice in the short term. That's the whole point. You're not going to cling to something that's nasty. You want to get rid of it. But in the long term, the overall bargain, beyond the publicity. Publicity always wants to tell you how much better off you'd be with this. And a wise purchaser says, oh no, I won't. Sometimes when I see adverts, I just shout out, liar. I don't need this, I don't want it. And it's not true anyway. But we wouldn't cling if things weren't nice. We wouldn't get involved if things weren't attractive, in the sense like a magnet, they pull you in. So not only is it time to say goodbye to the things of this life, so our mind is clear, our mind is free to move on, to move on to much better things, so much better. We need to let go for that to happen. We need to let go so as not to be confused at the time of death. We need to have let go well before death, but in a bigger picture, and this is what we're coming to today, we need to understand the basic problem of sticky mind itself. Clinging mind, attachment, always leads to trouble. So if we can powerfully, radically cut through our clinging now, we'll be doing ourselves a big favor, because what will happen in our next lives, if we do it strongly enough now, is we won't just fall into all the seductive traps of samsara. There'll be little warning lights flashing, and sometimes circumstances will help us not to get involved, not to get ourselves into a process of suffering again. So we need the motivation. Last week, we started to look at the details of letting go, and the first thing, the most easy thing materially to do, is letting go of stuff. So we looked at giving away, writing a will, thinking, giving ourselves a deadline so that we get it done as soon as possible. We don't linger, we don't leave stuff to the last minute. We're going to get it done, and then we don't want to know about stuff anymore. So I talked about that last time, but the best way is to think about all the stuff you had in past lives. You don't remember a damn thing. And you spend all those lives fussing about it, repairing it, insuring it, trying to get it, trying to look after it. And you can't even remember. Do you remember the bicycle you had in your last life? They probably had bicycles by then. No, probably don't. Or the wife, or the children, or the husband. Your mother, your own mother, 2 lives ago. Do you remember? The garden you put hundreds of hours of work into. Not a thing. So this is going to happen again. We're going on. Our mind never stops. Never stops. You will always be you. You'll never be somebody else. Never. You carrying your baggage, good and bad. We can't just swap with each other. It might be interesting. Through our communications, when they're quite strong and intimate, we do get a bit of a feeling of what the other person's life is like, but you will always be you. So now we want to help ourselves. So the stuff of this life is finished. You're going to die. No way around it. The last thing you want with your dying mind is for it to be involved with stuff. Stuff's just stuff. The very nature of stuff is that it goes from person to person. Or from, like in France, it goes from person to the state and the taxman, and so on. If I died here, 60% would go straight to the state. Stuff moves from person to person. That's how it is. So we don't want to be involved with that. So we give ourselves a timeline. We do our very best. We looked at this last time. You think about the complicated bits, family fights, who wants what, and we try and do our best. And the important thing is you do your best, and this is in the backup document, I explain it quite a bit. No one can do more than their best. You try from your heart to do the very best for everyone, and then you come to the deadline and say, I did my best, I don't want to know any more about it. You talk with your kids, you say, it's not my problem anymore. I finished with stuff. And I did my best. I'm sorry if anybody's offended. I did my best. I can't do more than that, so please forgive me. if, according to you, it's not the best. I don't want to know anymore. I'm going to die. I'm on the way out. Or you can put it maybe not so dramatically or so strongly, but I feel, darling, that my time is measured, and I want to devote my heart, my mind to other things than material. So however you put it, that's up to you. That's why I gave you the homework. Only you know your brothers, sisters, children, whatever it is. And you have to work through how to do it the best, and then to learn to then shut that door. Stuff finished. So then we move on. Now we have to say goodbye to people. And I want to take a little pause in this logic of letting go of stuff, letting go of people, letting go your own story. They're the big steps in this letting go. Letting go of stuff, letting go of people, letting go your own story. To talk about the journaling, the writing that I mentioned last week. It's, as I said last week, it's a Nyingmapa exercise that Akon Rinpoche had us do as Buddhists, and that later became part of the Tararopa therapy in a process called Back to Beginnings. Unlike Back to Beginnings, we don't journal back to our earliest memories, and then from the earliest memories back to here, and then a third time back to the earliest memories. That's part of the Tararopa process that precedes a rebirthing experience. We're not doing that. We're not rebirthing. We're re-dying. So we are preparing for the dying. So we go back, and then we'll come forward. When we go back, as I said last time, we need to journal the things that affected us as a human being. We're not writing a story for anybody else's eyes. This is for your eyes only. And so the outer CV, credentials, the travels and all of that, unless it affected you and your mind significantly, is not really important. We're not writing an autobiography. We are writing the inner story of our mind's emotional and spiritual journey through this life. How people affected us, how places and workplaces and so on affected us. And so we work backwards, we make a time frame, we see how much time we can allocate to each month, to each year, but we give special time from now because we can remember last month. And remembering last month will open up the memories of the month before that led to that. And slowly you open the doors of memory, and we'll go back through this journey of our mind. And we'll look especially at the things, the circumstances, the relationships that hurt, and the ones that benefited, the ones that brought us worldly happiness, and the ones that damaged us, the ones that in which we damaged other people as well. That's very important. But as we journal going back to our birth, we are recalling the facts. And unless you feel a particular need, we are not working with the facts. Once we start coming back in the other direction, and you will have wanted to have finished this back and forwards journaling well before you're gone, if you can. I mean, sometimes you can't tell, but if you've got some idea of how much time you've got, you want to give yourself. You say, don't leave the journaling to the last minute. Now, when we come back from birth to the present time, we will be working with the information that we journaled, you'll maybe fill in more information, because as you go back from the story, from earliest memories up, other things will come back, so you'll fill in the information. But what we want to do is two areas: forgiveness and appreciation, gratitude, whatever you want to call it. Forgiveness and gratitude. So as we go through our story from the earliest times we remember, we're working with memory here. Of course, you could add to that what you don't remember, the most vital years in your mother's womb, and those first 1 or 2 years where so much happened, where you learned to start talking, walking, eating, recognizing things. Most people don't remember. Most people's earliest memories go back to 3 years old, 2 years old. And even then it's one snapshot. It's not like you remember all of your third year, your second year. Those very vital years we don't remember. So you could, artificially create them and say, thank you, Mum, thank you this, thank you that, and so on, of course. But we're much more concerned with what we do remember, the memories that we carry. So when there has been harm, there will be two aspects of harm. Either somebody harmed you, or you harmed somebody else. When somebody harmed you, then we do our very best to forgive them. However you do that, that will depend on your knowledge, your maturity, your Buddhist experience. But we forgive them for our benefit. The memories of those who harmed us, sometimes very traumatic, if we can, we want to release them. In Vajrasattva practice, the actual meaning of the purification, which is Tolo Shakpa in Tibetan, it means to set down a burden, baggage, a weight our mind carries. Okay, that was this life's karma. Let's close it off in this life, not carry it forward. And if through the power of karma, this may be a painful thought, but we do need to think about it, you are going to meet again those who harmed you in future lives, then we don't want more and more of the same. You hurt me, then I'll hurt you in return, and so on. Just never ending. We want to tidy up our side. And the way we do that is forgiveness. We forgive them. If they're still alive, you can even write them a letter or an email and forgive them. But it's for our benefit, so it's mainly in your own mind. And then when we've hurt somebody else, we ask for forgiveness for ourselves. We apologize. Very frankly, and you're not in public, you're not in court, you're not even saying this to anybody out there. So we don't need to say yes, but, and well, I was justified doing that. If you hurt them, you hurt them. And we don't want to hurt anybody. Now, they say, there's a saying, that a dying person sometimes sees the whole of their life flash before them. I don't think it happens to everyone, but it is an experience you can have. Sometimes one experience you can have is that you die while you're alive. You go mentally through death while you're alive. And this has happened to me. I've had that experience. The only reason I'm telling you is that exactly that happened. I remembered people I'd hurt, and I'd actually forgotten about it. Now, either I'd forgotten that I'd hurt somebody, just forgotten, or maybe my mind had suppressed the image that I'd hurt that person because it doesn't really fit with my ego pride. Whatever it was, in that moment of going through a micro death while you're alive, then it's true, it's amazing. And the things that came out in that sudden journey through all of your life, very powerfully, were the people we'd hurt. Now, if you don't work with that before, this is the sort of experience that can come up in your last minutes and hours, where you remember the harm and there is remorse and confusion. We don't want that. So we just very simply, from the depth of our heart, ask for forgiveness. Of course, if you know the practice, we do Vajrasattva, we do Buddhist forms of purification, which are very, very effective. And then gratitude. As we go through our lives, we will realize once we've told the story going backwards, and now we're revisiting it from the earliest memories upwards, we will be much more lucid about how kind somebody was, how they helped you gain the qualities you have, either by example or whatever it was. And so we feel gratitude. In Mahayana teachings, gratitude is said to be at the very heart of love. Loving kindness, whatever we call it, metta, maitri, mainly comes through gratitude. When you think of how somebody helped you, especially those who helped you a lot, our heart warms. We think automatically, if only I could help them back, do something for them now. And it gives us a very authentic feeling of loving kindness, love for the person. So when we work through our story, and then we stop and we try to really generate gratitude. Now, that generation of gratitude is for whatever happened, but it is also focused on the future, is when we meet again in future lives, may I benefit you however you need, and especially may I help you on your journey to Dharma, to the Bodhisattva path, the precious bodhicitta. May it arise in those in whom it's not arisen, and so on. So we make deep wish for the future to be able to help that person. And then we think also of all the people who've helped us in past lives, like that person. And we feel a gratitude in general towards sentient beings, and we want to become a bodhisattva to help them. And the same with those who hurt us. We want to think of future lives, and although in this life our story was one of pain and suffering and harm, through the power of purification when we meet in future lives, may the strength of the karmic connection we had through this pain become a joyful karma, a karma that's helpful and liberating. So if you're following, take a sip of coffee. We're in letting go, right? Letting go stuff, letting go people, letting go your own story. I've made a deviation, a parenthesis about journaling and how we're going to journal, and this will help our process. Now I'm going to make another deviation within the deviation before we get back to our letting go process. And this is about Tonglen. Tonglen is the quintessential meditation practice in the 7-point mind training that we're basing these teachings on. It's the way we deal with relative reality. And then we have shunyata meditation for ultimate reality. So Tonglen, Tong means sending, giving, Len means taking, receiving. And I think many of you know how to do Tonglen practice. But if you don't, now I need to give you a very simple version. If you're interested in a less simple version, please email me and I'll send you the links for Zoom teachings on Tonglen. But Tonglen is a very simple process of training the mind, whereby we want to take suffering to our core experience, to our heart, release it, and replace it with goodness. Let's not say, we can say with happiness, but happiness actually, Dewa doesn't mean happiness. It means well-being, what is healthy, what is good. So we are, Len means taking to ourselves suffering. That suffering dissolves into our pure nature, into the pure nature, Buddha nature. And from everything that is good, we breathe into the situation goodness. So it's based on the breath. It follows the breath. So now, between now and the time that we die, in this training for dying, there will be pain. Physical pain, mental pain. Whenever there is pain, then this is a wonderful opportunity to do Tonglen. Later on, when we're dealing with the actual moment of death, Tonglen becomes the best thing to do as you're dying. And we learn a very special way, if you're awake, lucid, how to, your last breaths can be done using Tonglen. But now we're looking at Tonglen. Now, Tonglen in general, whenever there's pain, we think, this pain I have. Physical pain, because you're not well. Or this pain I have in my mind, through my emotions, my feelings, my memories, my fear of death, whatever it is. If it hurts, think, I'm not the only one. Just now, just like me, so many others, even in this planet, let alone all the other worlds, are dying. And we think, if only this pain that I feel could embody and take away their pain. And we breathe it into ourselves, visualizing it as dark smoke. Dark, ugly smoke, because pain is horrible. When the mind hurts, it's terrible, it's horrible. So we don't make it something elegant, it's something not nice. And we pull it towards ourselves with a heartfelt wish, if only this could make dying easier for somebody else. So if your shoulder hurts, then you think of all the people whose shoulder hurts. If you're regretting leaving your house, then think of all the people attached to their house all over the planet, and think if only their dying process could be made a bit easier. And it's physical. As you breathe in, it's almost like you could take it away, breathe it into yourself. And when you breathe it into yourself, when it comes into you, your core nature is Buddha, is ultimate goodness. None of the pain can survive there. So it says, like a drop of water falling on a white hot block of iron. Gone. No hesitation, no maybe goes, maybe not. It's a drop of water. It's a big block of white hot iron. There's not a bit left. So we take our own suffering, we remind ourselves of our true nature is Buddha, and the suffering goes in the Buddha's immense peace and loving care. And from that peace and loving care, we breathe into ourselves relief, knowledge, healing, however appropriate. So Tonglen's a big training. We're training it progressively. We learn to get the feel of it. That's a very simple explanation. When we breathe out, we imagine we're breathing white, healing light into ourselves, or if we're thinking of other beings with the same mental or physical suffering, you actually breathe into them. Beautiful, beautiful feeling of release. You can let go the fear or the attachment. Smile. Just let go. Big, big mind, like Buddha mind. You feel like you're healing tens, hundreds, thousands of other people who are in a similar situation to yourself, and maybe so much worse. So Tonglen is the way we train our mind in letting go and love, and it's very, very deep and intelligent. So now we're coming back to the journaling process. See, this was a deviation into Tonglen during the journaling deviation, right? So journaling, when we come to the harm especially and the forgiveness, when you think of those who harmed you, you are forgiving them. So we do that very directly, very specifically for our own karma. But then you think, that person who hurt me, maybe it was a bully at school. Let's take a simple example. Many people have been hurt, abused, much worse. But let's just take a bully at school. Then you think of all the people who spent a year, 2 years, 3 years as a kid being bullied, scared of that person, scared to go to school, whatever it is. So we do Tonglen. We think of all of them. And as we try to take their suffering as black smoke and dissolve it into Buddha mind and breathe out an inner strength, an ability to cope with what's happening to them and so on, as best we can. This is like medicine for our own suffering. Whatever harm somebody did to us, then this is part of Buddhist medicine for healing what you carry in your own subconscious. And then when it comes to the people we have hurt, then we do the same thing. We do Tonglen for all of those who are hurting other people. We take away in our imagination the mind poisons, the anger, the hatred, the resent, the jealousy that makes people hurt each other. We draw it out of them like poison from a wound, and we breathe into them healing, kindness, compassion, understanding, respect for other people, all the good qualities. So in the journaling, as we are going through, we take our time. Let's hope we have time, but we give ourselves good time to forgive, to ask forgiveness, and then to appreciate. When in Dharma, in our Bodhisattva teachings, we do the 7-point offering and so on, seven points. Then we have like prostration and refuge and purification. And we do rejoicing in virtue. So we learn to do that stylishly. And we learn to make wonderful karma in the process. When you're feeling that kindness, you go back, you remember how somebody helped you. Nobody needed to help you. Somebody helped you. How wonderful. So wonderful. And then as we feel that warmth and gratitude inside us, then We feel grateful to all of those humans who are helping each other, all the kind, compassionate, caring humans, helping those not so well off. We think of all the saintly people in all the religions who follow a code of kindness and respect, and all the good they're doing. In particular, we think of the bodhisattvas and all the good they're doing. We rejoice in their virtue. And then we think of all the Buddhas and the wonderful maximum benefit they've brought. So working up from one instance of Uncle Fred who helped you, and whatever it was, then our mind becomes big. And you feel so happy about the goodness that's being done everywhere. Big mind. So that's a little bit, and of course this is in your backup document about preparing for dying. So now this parenthesis about journaling with its own parenthesis about Tonglen. Now we're going back to letting go now of people, and I hope you'll understand a bit better why. Because we need not to cling. And then, as I said last week, if your close ones can see you dying peacefully, harmoniously, as best as one can, it will be one of the biggest gifts you can give them. So we have to work out how to do this. Now, here's a point. Here's an interesting point, and it applies to our everyday Buddhism as well as this particular training for dying. What does non-attachment mean? What are you becoming as a Buddhist? Are you becoming a cold-hearted, indifferent, what they call it in English, a cold fish? I don't know why a fish, but does it mean you're not interested anymore? No, because if you get involved, you're going to suffer. And we are Buddhists and we're not getting involved. We're not suffering and attachment and loved ones and so on. No love. No. Let's just sit on our cushion and be peaceful. Follow the breath. Let's be mindful of the breath. And yes, I'm happy. Don't need people. People are trouble. And of course, people aren't the trouble. People are our way to enlightenment. It's in the Hinayana path that people are trouble. It makes a lot of sense. The Hinayana path is the most perfect, excellent, good sense for people of a certain mind frame. Don't go there. Men, women, trouble. My old mother used to say, men, Katya, men. So she wasn't interested as a woman in men. In general, men are problems. And, and the other way around. And then these days, every time, all the time, whatever you're attracted to, men, women, all the different combinations. The trouble isn't them. If you're a bodhisattva, they are the very source of your enlightenment. As Shantideva says, how to look on other people. Says, look on them with the most love you can possibly imagine, because it's through them you will get enlightened. Of course, you can't walk along the street doing this. You get locked up, looking on everyone with a great love, but in your heart. So what are we doing then? If we are detaching ourselves from people, we are the ones we love and care for. We are not learning to not love them and to not care for them. We're learning to love them in a very different and better way, and to care for them in a very different and better way. So we don't have to kill our heart, shut it down, put it in the fridge. We need to open our heart, to make it a big heart, our bodhisattva mind, where if there are loved ones, through them we got this most precious taste of love, the smell of love, the feel of love. We know what it's like to care for somebody. And we're going to use that wonderful, let's say, free sample. Life gave you a free sample of love, where you cared for somebody. You have somebody and you want to help. You care what happens to them. Their life means something to you. This is the point, they are real for you. The rest are statistics. They're faces, people on the street. But the ones you've cared for, this barrier between people. I was laughing, when was it? Yesterday, I went into a shop here, vegetable shop, bought some vegetables. The lady who sells the vegetables is very chatty, but she's Mediterranean. So her natural body distance, the safe distance between people is very different from a British body distance. So as we were talking about something, you're actually talking about my name, Holmes, and Sherlock Holmes and all of that, she was leaning in more closely than a shopkeeper in England would have leant in. So I was thinking how, nothing, but I mean, she wasn't interested in me in any way at all. It was just this thing, and you feel it with the body energies, because my English reaction is you want to step back, but if I'd have stepped back, she'd have probably stepped forward. And I remember, what was it, in the 70s, somebody did a film. It was an embassy reception where they had English, Italians, Americans, and so on. And it was almost like a dance, because they were the ones advancing and retreating, and the others retreating in front of them. So anyway, the point of love and care in worldly life is that we became close to somebody. We were let into their world. They let us into their world. We let them into our world. And so we cared. That's what happens. So this is what happens with bodhisattvas, except we do it differently. We care. We love other sentient beings. And we are interested in their world, how they function, what makes them happy, what makes them hurt, because that's our way to enlightenment. But we don't get attached. We're not sticky. And something wonderful and strange will happen if you do what I'm trying to describe, but you can only really do it in yourself, experimentally, in your own situation with the other people. But you are learning to love and care for them even more than before, but to find the stickiness and the attachment and to let go of that. So the strange thing that will happen is that you will see them that you will see them through new eyes. Now, sometimes this just happens for good meditators. Happens on a daily basis. The people you know and who treat you with familiarity, you see them like strangers. It's a very unusual experience. It's quite funny. It's very helpful. So, like in my case, a person you've been living with for 50 years looks like a stranger when you walk in the morning. And so we joke about it. We say, "Do I know you?" Because it's the same feeling. And it's what I described, I think, last week about Ringo Tulku's story about marrying a new woman every day, marrying a new man every day, whatever it is. But it's quite stunning. At first, you might feel a bit guilty about it because that's somebody you've known. It's your daughter, it's your son. But they look just like anybody else. This is a most wonderful sign. This is a most wonderful sign that your heart is free and you can really love and care for them. But now it's a love that's more universal, not abstract universal love. I hate that. I shouldn't say that about love, but may all sentient beings be happy. What the hell are all sentient beings? It's an idea. It's an idea. It's a concept. Very nice. It's very self-comforting. I care for everybody. When you get out there in life and you start meeting samples of the everybody, it's really complicated. And you don't feel the same as when you do abstract Buddhist love. May all beings be happy. When you actually meet one, you're not quite feeling the same, oh, may you be happy. May you be happy, because they're a pain in the butt or they're not nice pieces of work and so on and so on. So this is a really good sign. I'm not describing it very well. I'm sort of sketching around something we need to do with our loved ones. And then depending on their mind's nature, their mental stability or fragility, quite how much of that we express to them is secondary. But we can sometimes talk very honestly and tell them, I love you very much, but actually in my own beliefs, I'm a Buddhist and I'm preparing my mind for a huge adventure, and I want to love everyone as much as I love you. And don't feel bad that I'm not weepy and tragically upset to be leaving this world and my family. It happens to us all. Everybody dies. It's going to happen to me. It will happen to you. And the most important thing is to go smoothly and to go back into the great love and the great grace that loves everybody. That is our home. That's where I'm going. And so I'm trying to love and care for you, but also not to be attached to you so I can leave this world. However, whatever words you find, I'm just playing with words to an invisible, imagined person. I don't know how I'd say it to real people. But basically, we need to get rid of the stickiness, but it doesn't mean to go into a cold, dispassionate, uncaring, unloving space. On the contrary, that's the point. But we do need to find in ourselves our own attachment and need for the other person. Now, when we go, I'm going to go back now to the journaling. And as we go through the story, we're going through it episode by episode, forgiving, gratefulness, and so on, gratitude. But later on, so in the next session and the session afterwards, we're going to be looking at the whole picture, not the individual moments, but we want to see in our life where there was a feeling of incompleteness, need, and how we sought that in other people and in all sorts of things, in success, how we sought it in stuff, having possessions, having status, having a nice house, nice stuff in general, nice clothes. I've got a friend always dresses in Yves Saint Laurent. It's his favorite designer, and looks very nice in those terms. But we look because we feel incomplete. Because we feel incomplete, or another word, unfulfilled, then we look for completeness and fulfillment outside, in human relationships, social status, possessions, all sorts of things. So as we go through the larger story, we'll come back to that in future, time, but I need to mention it now for your homework. Then this neediness. I need you, or I have needed you, is one of the things we're looking for. So as we are working with our loved ones and family, then we're replacing our worldly love, which is often very closely linked with need. We need something from them because we feel we are missing something. We're going to replace that with bodhisattva love, where everything that we need comes from inside, from Buddha mind, from our lineage blessing, from all the refuges. And we're setting this very strong understanding in our subconscious, in our alaya vijnana, because those seeds will help us in future lives. It may be very vague, you'll be growing up, you'll be 20, you've got some, it's like an inner mind itch of, okay, I've fallen in love and we're doing this and we're doing that, but is this everything? There's something else. Whatever, it will get you back to Dharma. Getting back to Dharma's a whole journey. What we want to do is to get back in the next life to get at least this far, but then go further. It's a big agenda. We got pretty far this time, pretty good. So we've got to get back to that. So we need to lob these grenades of virtue into the future, strong, so strong, so that as we are thinking about our loved ones, doing the mundro, the basic practice for this, and as we actually meet them, talk with them, and explore our feelings live on the spot, we need to be getting rid of the need and telling ourselves about the beauty of the Bodhisattva's love, which is a wonderful care for everybody. Everybody is as real for them as your best lover ever was. You're in their world. And we're in everybody's world. So I think today, that's the main topic we had to cover today. We've done 2 sessions now. These 2 sessions are mainly about letting go this life, because you're going to go anyway. Now, the letting go, I need to go back to the comments I made about it's complicated to understand what happens at death. Moment of death, the few days after death, the bardo in between lives. But by the end of it, you're that bawling baby that's lost its mind, right? You've lost this mind. This is what we're looking at. It's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to me, if we're lucky enough to be reborn humans. So in that process, some of the information we have concerns the couple of days after physical death. Mind is still be inside the body. It's not left the body totally. There's a presence there. And you see this with corpses. New people freshly dead, there's a lot of presence. But there comes a point where it really is just a piece of dead meat and the person's gone. So there's that. But after the mind leaves the body, there's a couple of days, day or two, when it can still be aware. So there is one thing we know from the teachings, at least, is that the awareness doesn't go when the brain dies, and the brain, the gut, and all the rest. When that stops working, there is awareness, and that awareness is still karmically linked to the body and to your family and your place. So people can see their body, see people coming, paying their respects, mourning, weeping. Sometimes they're confused. They can't understand. Why can't you see me? Why can't you hear me? I'm talking to you. Hey, somebody knows you so well, and they're just there, and they're talking about you. What they're saying, you've already become a story, and there's been, yes, you want, but, and all of that. You're aware of it, and you can't communicate unless somebody is psychic. And the other way around, psychic people can be aware of the departed spirit for a period of some hours, some days, before the power of Bardo just sweeps it off and really it's gone from this life. So coming back to something that was at the very beginning of the last session, how the mind at the time of death, during the period of dying, long period, approaching death, dying itself, and afterwards, the mind is like an arrow, and the way it is pointed, the way it's oriented, is very important for what will happen afterwards. So this letting go of stuff, letting go of the people, is very important for that time. If through our work, day after day, journaling, week after week, month after month, in the time up to death, has really put into our mind stream this feeling of moving on to the great mind, the Buddha mind, the wonderful mind of love and care for everybody, and that this life is over, then those thoughts can really help us in that time to point the arrow in the right direction, and off we go. So that's important. Now, what we didn't do in this session, I'm always optimistic in my thoughts, was about letting go of our own story. So we'll come back to that in 2 weeks' time. Next week, there's no Saturday session at all. So we come back in 2 weeks' time to these teachings. But your homework is to start the journaling process and to think more generally about your life in terms of the journaling process. And you may already realize some places where you need to forgive, ask for forgiveness. You might want to think, how would you do that if somebody's still alive? Or whether you do it just in your heart, in your mind, how you do it sincerely. The gratitude, the people we are really grateful to. But the main point of the homework in terms of this third area of letting go your story is to see how you identified with that story. For instance, me. I did a bit of training as a chemical engineer. I've forgotten all my chemistry. I've forgotten most of my engineering. But I do put it on CVs, and I do think of it, I'm a scientist, I'm a chemical engineer. I'm not really, I've been a Dharma teacher all my life. But then, I'm a Dharma teacher. I don't quite put a badge on. Can you see my badge there? I'm a Dharma teacher. Some people wear more of a badge than others. There are some who shall remain nameless, who are Tibetan gurus, who wear such a big "I'm a guru" badge. You want to punch them on the nose, but anyway, not a good idea. But maybe you know some of the ones I mean. And the very best teachers, 16th Karmapa, He said, I'm just a monk. He didn't say, I'm the best guru on the planet, even though he probably was. He said, I'm just a monk. My own teacher, Akon Rinpoche, was so humble. His Dharma center, Samiling, the first big one in Europe. He spent all of his time bringing the best teachers there, not making it his center where he taught. We had Karmapa, Dalai Lama, Dugo Chensi Rinpoche, Tulku Urgen, Tai Situpa, all the Kaju regents, main Nima Palamas. Dalai Lama came twice. He said, I'm nobody, but I want to bring these people because they're real meditators. They're real scholars. They have the knowledge. So we identify. We've identified with everything, stuff, property, with people, our family, being who we are within the family, being dad, being mum. And then we've identified with being the younger victimized sister or the big brother or whatever it was. This is very important. This is very important. So we need, as we do the journaling, to discover our own identification process, because it's finished. A few years from now, there'll be no more Ken Holmes Dharma teacher. It'll be Ken Holmes, milk. That's the truth of it. I can't even tell anybody once I get language. You know, in my last life, I was a Dharma teacher. It's finished. And I spoke French, I spoke Tibetan, translated lots of things from Tibetan. The best, if it's useful, that might happen will be in the next life, I'll learn English, French, and Tibetan more easily. So this story has ended. We are becoming beautiful bodhisattva with a huge mind, not identified with a persona, but identified with the Buddha that's within us all. So your homework, I mean, it's going to take you months to go through your real journaling, bit by bit, but your homework is to think about your life, going back, coming forward, and to see how you, at various stages, built up identities. And they probably changed. You probably stopped being an engineer and became a beatnik. And then I wasn't a beatnik, I was something else. And then I became a Buddhist, and so on and so on. So that's important. We're going to let go of that beautifully. So thank you very much. We'll do our dedication and then have a bit of time for discussion. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained. Through the main enemy, our mind's defilements, being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every sentient being become freed from the ocean of existence, troubled by the waves of rebirth, aging, sickness, and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not arisen. May its development know no setbacks, and may it increase ever more and more. Through this virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. And I'd like to make a special dedication today. Earlier this morning, one of our Samiling Dharma teachers, Professor Robnan, who some of you know and who've met, passed away. So I'd like to dedicate the benefit, the virtue, the goodness of this session to his own ongoing journey. He's very helped The Taisitupa, Gyatso Rinpoche, some great lamas know, and they're helping him. So I'm sure he's okay. But nevertheless, I'd like to, out of my own gratitude, dedicate to him. Okay, so anything, anybody, you have any comments you'd like to make or any questions you'd like to ask?
Ken, Susan here.
Hi, Susan. Yeah.
I'm just slightly confused when you were talking latterly about the awareness that remains with the body. Did I understand correctly that the mind stream has actually left within a couple of hours, but what is left is sort of the personality kind of thing?
This is the difficult thing, to know what stays, what goes. So we can say words. I can make a little list if you like, but the reality of it is so much more than the words. But the teachings are that from the moment of clinical death, awareness, let's call it, can stay in the body for up to 3.5 days. It may be simply a question of minutes or hours. It could be 1 day, it could be 2 days. Usually by 3 days, the mind has left the body. So it no longer has location. See, while we're alive, we have location. You can't help but be where your body is, except when you have out-of-body experiences. But basically, we're located where the body is. The mind goes back into a more general state of consciousness and awareness. And so it can be very universal, very cosmic. And in an instant, it can be drawn back to the corpse that you were in. You know, when people describe accidents and they say have an out-of-body experience, and they say, I could see the ambulances coming, I could see the helicopter, I was out of my body, I was far away, I could hear people talking, and so on. It's sort of like that. But now the mind is really out of the body. And it's Bado means in between, and it really does mean in between that. Beside in between death and the next birth, it also means you're in and out of huge cosmic experiences and ability to be anywhere that you think of, and some kind of localization specific. So that's described a bit. There's another factor that comes into it that the Buddhist texts per se don't describe. The Buddhist lamas are very familiar with, and it seems quite true, which is the thing called la. And la is, when we're alive, it is a key focus of your prana, of your energies. So just yesterday was full moon day, for instance. On full moon days, the la, which is your kind of concentrated inner energy body, is in the top of your head. So that's why people have disturbed experiences often on full moon day. And it travels around the body. So for Tibetans, if you're going to have an operation on a certain part of the body, you check with the lama to make sure the la isn't there, because that can be quite harmful. You wait for a day when it's quite somewhere else in the body. But la, once we die, is this feeling of you that remains in objects and in places, but it's nothing to do with your own stream of consciousness. So people will feel it. I'll give you an example. When I was, 20, I worked with a lady who'd been one of Britain's very top psychics. She'd retired, it was too much. But she couldn't help it. She was just very open. And somebody gave me an American Indian bead belt. And I showed it to her and she held it, and all of a sudden she went like this. I said, what is it? And she said, not the person who gave this to you, but the person this belonged to before died drowning. And so I was curious. So I asked the person who gave me the bead belt, and they checked it out, and this is just what had happened. So something of that person and that person's story was in the object. And very often objects are charged with a person. So the way the text describe this, they say, imagine you had a ball of sandalwood and you left it in a drawer. And then you take the ball of sandalwood out and you take it somewhere else, so it's gone. But nevertheless, the smell that's in all the clothes and that's in the drawer remains. So something of us can sometimes remain in inanimate objects, and then something of us can be sensed. Maybe I'm saying too much about this. I don't know. Maybe there are other questions, but it's interesting. Around that same time that I was working with Simi, this person, my girlfriend was also a psychic. It was one of those times of your life. And I took her once to a castle in Kent. We were just looking around. We'd gone out, nice sunny spring day. And then we went into one room and she froze. She went completely white. All she could say was, get me out of here, get me out of here. So we got out. And then we didn't have much money. We hadn't bought a guidebook before we went in, but I got one to see what it was. And it was a room in which there'd been murders and terrible things. So the room retained the feeling that she felt. So this is La as well. So we've got the ongoing stream of consciousness. We've got the La, what goes with the stream of consciousness, what survives physical death in general into the next life is karma and dharma. The karmas we've made that have the power to be experienced in a future life, they carry on inside our stream of consciousness, and they will create the circumstances of our next life and the life afterwards. But also Dharma, our Dharma, strength, connection, and practices, they stay with us if we do them properly, right motivation, dedication at the end, and so on. They survive death. And this is the curious bit, something of this life's association and our current familiar awareness survives death and disappears. So they say roughly about halfway through the bardo, this familiar feeling, like me with my whiskers and hair and 2 arms and 2 legs and so on, the familiar feeling is very much there at first, and the attraction to the places we were in can be there. We can go back. Less and less we'll feel. But if in the next life I'm going to be an Irish wolfhound, then I'm going to start feeling like a very big shaggy dog. And not like I've got 2 arms and 2 legs, but I've got 4 legs, and smells are going to become more and more interesting. And, the doggy karma is going to take over, and Ken, the human Dharma teacher, will be gone. So that's complicated. If you want to explain it technically, well, where is that? Is it still in the stream of consciousness? How is that different from the La? It's not obvious, but in practical terms, it seems to be really, really what happens. People who've just died, if somebody's a Lama, you can contact their mind. You can talk to them as the person they were and say, this is what's happening. You're dying, you've died, and this is what you need to do. When this happens, do this. There's something there that's contactable. But it gets harder and harder as the bardo time goes by. And if they're already starting to feel like an Irish wolfhound, forget it. You're not going to be want to be telling them, be a good dog,
Yeah.
or whatever it is. I don't know. I'm being frivolous there, but
Yeah.
whatever we can gather of what this death process really means in the long term, we need to hammer that home into ourselves to motivate ourselves to do these things, really well and from the heart.
Can I have a question? May I ask?
Yes, Sunita, of course. Yes.
So I lost someone very dear to me during the COVID period. But he was on a, that pipe thing, ventilator.
Yeah.
In order to put the ventilator, of course, they make you unconscious. You're under sedation. And then his blood pressure, went down and he passed away. They wouldn't let me in till what they call they'd prepared him, but I did go speak to him about whatever little I know. My question really is that would someone who had been sedated, which I assume affects their brain and possibly not their mind, still have the awareness of the passage? I had a distinct feeling that he did. When I sat down to meditate straight after in the hospital room, another room, because it was COVID and they wouldn't let me stay with him very long. I could hear him asking questions about his wife and not being able to let go. And I kept reassuring that she would be taken care of and he could move on. Whether it was my imagination or whether he was really trying to communicate and finding it hard to leave, I don't know. So my question really is, when you're sedated and you die, your body and its organs give up, is your awareness still there? Is your mind still there?
Well, thank you for your question, and I'm sorry about your friend.
My brother, actually.
Your brother, yeah. So, according to what I've studied or what I've heard from lamas, I can't say a definite yes or a definite no, but I think it's very, very possible. And I did have some conversations in Cape Town, actually, with people there who worked with people in long-term coma. And people who'd emerged from the coma afterwards. And so some of them reported, they said they could hear what people were saying. They were very aware, even though from the outside they looked completely gone. They were just, whatever a coma looks like from the outside, that's what they looked like. But, and so this group, I think it's called Coma Awareness or something like this, were wanting to say to people, do talk to people in coma positively, be a helpful presence. You can't guarantee that they're aware of it, but we certainly know from some of the cases that we've studied that that's a likelihood. And so it's a good thing to do. And anyway, it's what we do as Buddhists when somebody's dying, whether they are often these days sedated and not obviously conscious. We communicate with them, we talk to them in our heart, in our mind, as though they were lucid. We tried to give them helpful words and guidance. Does that help, Sunita?
Yes, thank you. I mean, it's a question that's been in my mind throughout. Strangely, whenever someone's passed away in my family, I've been there. And so I've always sort of wondered whether speaking to them just as they've left helps them on.
I would encourage it very, very wholeheartedly. I think maybe you're a person who's gifted to help people in those states.
I don't know. Thank you.
But I hope you are.
And quick question from me.
Yeah.
You mentioned you mentioned at the beginning with the journaling process that it had influences from the Nyingma tradition. Can you speak on that briefly?
I don't know the origins. I just know that Akon Rinpoche's own training in Tibet more or less finished when he was, 17 years old, and that his training had been both from local Kagyu lamas, but also from Nyingmapa lamas. And so afterwards, when he was teaching us, I seem to remember him saying, because I was a bit surprised, I thought I had a sort of rough clue about what was in the Kagyu transmission that he was giving to us. We're going through Mundro and things like that. And I think he mentioned this is from his Nyingmapa teachers. And he seems, from what I gather of those first 17 years of training, is he seems to have been fast-tracked in a lot of the teachings, like teachings about channels and chakras, because the first Akong was such a master of those things. Somehow, for whatever reason, at a very young age, he'd been taught a lot. And I think a lot of it came from Nyingma teachers. And then his big year of Mahamudra training was in Shechen Kontro's monastery, which was mainly Nyingma transmissions.
Oh, okay. So, okay. So you believe that you remember that you were confused about it being a Kagyu transmission, and you clarified it.
That's as far as I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. No, I never heard it before. I wondered where it had come from, because in some ways it's so much like the first stage of the path of accumulation of the four mindfulnesses as well. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Very much so. And there's another practice he had some of us do at the time, which also comes from the Nyingma tradition. It doesn't sound like fun, but in fact it's very, very helpful. Is that each night as you fall asleep, you imagine that you're falling asleep as you're dying, but you imagine dying in a different way. So,
really?
Yeah. So you have to, after about the first 20 or 30 days, you have to start really using your imagination about different ways in which you could die. But it's a very good preparation, because it's kind of opens the mind to the fact we don't know how we're going to die.
I'd never heard that before. I knew about the imagining you dying, but not in a different way. I actually did that once with the internet. Over a month, I just went on one news site and listed all the ways people had died that day to create like a different list. Yale asked a question in her feed. It says, I had enough of being born again as a milk baby, going through the same samsara, more of the same. How can I reinforce and strengthen my chances to be born in Dewa Chen, also at death? Thank you.
Well, there's a very specific training for that, to be reborn, really to happen. And Dewa Chen is our Buddha nature, it's the pure nature of mind. A very special place. Sorry, I'm thinking of something. There's my hitchhiking days when I was young, and sometimes you get picked up in a really nice car. It's not your car, it belongs to somebody else. But while you're traveling, you're sitting, in a very comfortable seat of a Mercedes, and so and then you get out. So Dewa Chen is a very special Pure Land, which is like the Pure Lands. Pure Lands are Sambhogakaya, part of our Buddha nature. But this is a very special one. Whereas most other Pure Lands, we take an awful lot of virtue, good karma, deep meditation to achieve, like Milarepa's Pure Land and so on. Dewa Chen can be achieved if we fulfill 4 conditions. So there's a practices for rebirth in Dewa Chen. There's a Ngondro practice for it, preliminaries that we need to go through. And then we develop these 4 causes for rebirth in Dewa Chen. And then it can really happen that we can help as bodhisattvas help, but rather than having to be reborn in a human body to help other beings, we can help them from a place of pure light mind. And that's a wonderful thing to do. So there is that specific training for rebirth in Dewa Chen. More generally, if you practice Mahamudra path, then the Mahamudra teachings are so skillful. The Ngondro, developing the accumulations, the actual practice of Shunyata, nature of mind, is a very, very fast track way to be reborn in what other people will call Dewa Chen. Doesn't matter if there's Buddha Amitabha or Medicine Buddha or another Buddha there, your mind will be Dewa Chen means you have every well-being. Dewa means well-being. You are so well there. Everything is well, including our ability to help other beings. So either follow the Mahamudra path or follow the more bodhisattva path. It's still Vajrayana of the Dewa Chen practice and develop the 4 causes for rebirth in Dewa Chen. And usually what like Khenpo, quite a few teachers, but I'm thinking of Khenpo Damcha Dawa. He said actually in practice, if you can combine the Dewa Chen and the Mahamudra, he said you're on a winning track. Thanks, Yale. I'm sorry, I usually don't get time to look into the comments. So thank you, Vicky, for passing on Yale's question.
Hi, Ken. Can you hear me?
Yep, hear you well. I know.
Oh, I have trouble with my camera today, so you're spared seeing me today.
Right.
Just a couple of comments. On my diary, I'm now back 4 years, so I've gone back pre-COVID, and that was a very interesting time. I mean, you talked about forgiveness for those who hurt you, and gratitude for those who helped you, and I think during COVID, it created so many different, for want of a term, breaks in relationships, whether that's loving relationships or friendships or business relationships. And what struck me was that it's often the same person. Some person helped you a lot, and then the relationship broke down, and suddenly it's the same person who you think hurt you. So it's not 2 different people that you're dealing with. Second point I wanted to make was that in Ireland, as you probably know, we have the tradition of the wake, where the body is well, parted over, for want of a better expression, for 3 days. And lots of societies have that. We're probably going to talk about it later in the course, I don't know, but as you mentioned last week, in our, well, I presume probably the majority of the people on this, in our current society, you don't have the luxury of 3 days, whether that's by law or otherwise. And when my father died, he was living here with me, and I wanted to keep him for 3 days. But I was told, no, you have to be, and he was embalmed within, I think it was 24 hours or within 48 hours. So maybe that's something we will talk about later. Third thing, just a quick funny bit maybe. I used to have an Irish wolfhound many years ago.
Right.
So if you pass away before me, and it's touch and go because we're the same age, if you pass before me, after a short while, maybe I'll get an Irish wolfhound puppy, and you'll be most welcome.
Thank you. I'd like vegetarian dog food, please. Okay, thanks very much, Neil. Yeah, we will be, now we've gone through these main points about letting go this life, then the next two talks are mainly looking forward to where we're going and how to do it, how to die, what happens in the run-up to clinical death itself, what we can do, what we can't do. That's in the coming sessions. So thank you, everybody. And so it's 2 weeks before the next session. And I wish you all so very, very well until then.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
See you, Penny.
No Tonglen next week, is that right?
Yeah, there's no talk next week. Nothing at all. There's no Tonglen, nothing.
Okay.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Thank
Safe journey now.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.